days, when people hear about folks who arm themselves for self-defense, the typical reaction is to characterize them as vigilantes. That cry is that the armed folks are going to take the law into their own hands. Well, that position is just plain stupid, based on ignorance and fear. The laws of this country don't allow that. And responsible law-abiding citizens who arm themselves to follow those laws and to defend themselves and their loved ones are following the law just like you. Acting with vigilantism is not law-abiding. And frankly, anyone who does that is a bully, at the least, and a felon to some degree. So what exactly is vigilantism? Well, basically, it means taking the law into one's own hands and attempting to, and this is important, effect justice according to one's own understanding of what's right and what's wrong. Now, whether as an individual or a group, these actions are typically done with the use of force and violence. That's wrong. In this country, vigilantism has been around since we've been a country and before, and it continues to metamorphose over time. You have private watch groups that patrol their neighborhoods to guard against criminal activity. As long as they don't use force or violence to effect justice, they're fine. Anti-abortion extremists commit deadly attacks against family, healthcare facilities, and those workers, often in the name of religion, which is the basis of their view of what's right or wrong, and they don't like existing law. Environmental activists inflict economic losses on companies by obstructing lawful business activities that they think will cause harm to the air, water, or land. Now, the companies are following the law. The environmentalists, they don't like the law, right? So they want to take justice into their own hands. Every day, people use force and violence to exact revenge against someone whom they believe has done them wrong. In each case, vigilantes take it upon themselves to enact justice rather than enlist police officers, lawyers, judges, and the rest of the established legal machinery to do the job. It's either not sufficient, takes too long, whatever the argument is. They want justice now in their mind. In each case, vigilantes run the risk of starting a cycle of violence and lawlessness in which the victims of vigilantism take the law into their own hands to exact payback. If I become a vigilante and exact justice on you, you're going to turn around and exact justice on me, called revenge. The motivations underlying acts of vigilantism vary according to the individual vigilante. Some vigilantes seek to carry out personal agendas to protest existing law. Others seek to enforce existing law as they understand it or define it. Still, others seek to implement or call attention to some kind of higher law that they feel overrules the norms established by society's designated lawmaking institutions. I call those religious nuts. Since no state or federal jurisdiction offers any kind of vigilante defense to criminal prosecution, vigilantes must rely on moral rectitude of their cause to justify their acts. I was right and everybody knows it. Yet the morality of most acts of vigilantism is relative to whether one is the perpetrator or the victim, as the targets of vigilantism rarely agree that the acts were justified. You were just crazy. Rule of law is based on the notion that the United States is a nation of laws and not men. Under the rules of law, laws are thought to be independent of men and separate from human will. In other words, the law is the law and it must be followed, even when the human element factors into legal decision making. the decision maker is expected to be constrained by the law in making his or her decision. In other words, police officers, judges, juries should act according to the law and not according to their personal preference or private agendas. That's why the instructions given to juries are very important, because they frame the law for the layperson, which is a juror. By rule of law in this country, we, the people, have given federal and state governments what amounts to a monopoly over the use of force and violence to implement law. In other words, we've said to our governments, the laws must be followed, they must be implemented. Sometimes you got to get ugly. So we say you, governments, can have the structure to use force and violence to implement the laws that we want. By the same rule of law, we give private citizens the right to use force and violence to defend their lives and property, and in some instances, the lives and property of others. But it must be done under specific circumstances allowed by law. We can't make it up. Failure to use force within the law, whether it's a government or an individual, makes them nothing more than criminals. Private individuals can also make citizens arrest. However, they're not law enforcement officials, and the circumstances under which the law authorizes a citizen to do that is very narrow. Almost always limited to making an arrest for felonies committed in their presence. Not something that might happen, not something that you see or might see around the corner. So if a person happens to live in a high crime area and chooses to become a legally armed citizen, that is not vigilantism. That's preparation for self-defense under the law. Now, if that person went looking to bring someone to justice, then they are a vigilante and a criminal under the law. By taking law into their own hands, vigilantes flout the rule of law, effectively becoming lawmaker, police officer, judge, jury, executioner, and appellate court, only for the cause that they are pursuing. Those of us who have chosen to become armed for defensive purposes are not vigilantes. To make such a claim is just plain stupid. It took 100 years for the law to change in this country to prevent slavery. There were those against slavery and those for slavery. The Dred Scott Supreme Court decision said that slavery was legal. And that ruling lasted for 100 years. Both sides fought. Now, fortunately, the bad guys lost. The South will not rise again. You'll never take another brown person as a slave. I don't care how many songs you make about the stars and bars and what life used to be like. My point is this: the laws were changed, including the Constitution of the United States, to add amendments that will make it impossible for something like that to ever happen again. And one of the most powerful parts of the Constitution is the Equal Protection Clause. Now, the Second Amendment, number 2, gives every individual the right, they can choose to use it or not, to keep and bear arms for the defense of themselves, their loved ones, and their country. There are many who think that culturally today it's misplaced, it's wrong, it advocates violence. That's above my pay grade. All I know and care about is the law. The law says I have a right to keep and bear arms, and I intend to do that. I am not a vigilante. And if you don't like it that people can keep and bear arms, then change the law.